Most entrepreneurs believe that to double their revenue, they simply need to double their effort. They work longer hours, hire more people, and push harder against the ceiling. But there is a silent, invisible barrier that hard work cannot break. It's the reason 99% of businesses stall exactly where they are. Today, we aren't just looking at how to work harder. We're revealing the one thing you've been taught to ignore that is actually holding your empire back. Welcome back to the Audiobook Library. In the world of high-stakes business, the difference between a struggling founder and a visionary CEO isn't just talent. It's the ability to see the structures that others miss. When you started, your hustle was your greatest asset. But as you scale, that same hustle becomes your primary bottleneck. You've built a machine that requires your constant presence to function. This is the invisible barrier, the transition from doing the work to architecting the system. In this audiobook, we are diving deep into the strategic shifts required to remove yourself from the gears of your business so it can finally grow without you. If you've felt like you're hitting a wall despite doing everything right, pay close attention. The barrier is about to become visible. Chapter 1. The invisible barrier holding most entrepreneurs back. Most entrepreneurs believe they know what is preventing their business from growing. They blame a lack of money, a lack of customers, a lack of opportunities, a lack of time. And while those things can certainly create challenges, they are rarely the true reason a business remains stuck. Because if you look closely, you will notice something interesting. There are businesses with very little funding that grow rapidly. There are entrepreneurs who started with almost nothing and built massive companies. There are people operating in competitive markets who continue to expand while others struggle to survive. So the question becomes, what is the real difference? Why do some businesses scale while others remain trapped at the same level year after year? The answer is often invisible. It is not found in the market. It is not found in the economy. It is not found in your competitors. It is found in the way you think. Because every business eventually becomes a reflection of its owner. The owner's mindset, the owner's habits, the owner's decisions, the owner's limitations. If the entrepreneur grows, the business can grow. If the entrepreneur stays the same, the business often stays the same too. This is the invisible barrier that most people never recognize. They believe they are trying to scale a business. But in reality, they are trying to scale themselves. And that changes everything. Think about the early stages of building a business. In the beginning, hard work creates results. You hustle. You solve problems. You wear multiple hats. You do whatever is necessary. And for a while, that approach works. Because the business is small, simple, flexible. But eventually something changes. The business reaches a point where effort alone is no longer enough. You work longer hours. You push harder. You sacrifice more. Yet growth slows down. Revenue plateaus. Opportunities become harder to capture. Progress feels heavier. And that's where most entrepreneurs get frustrated. Because they respond by doing more of what worked before. More hours. More effort. More stress. But the problem isn't a lack of effort. The problem is that the game has changed. The skills that help you start a business are not the same skills that help you scale one. Starting requires action. Scaling requires structure. Starting requires hustle. Scaling requires systems. Starting requires doing everything yourself. Scaling requires building something that works without you. Most entrepreneurs never make that transition. And that becomes their invisible barrier. They remain trapped in the identity of the builder, the worker, the operator, the problem solver, even when the business needs them to become something different. A strategist, a leader, a designer of systems, a creator of leverage. This shift sounds simple, but it is incredibly difficult because it requires letting go. Letting go of control, letting go of old habits, letting go of the belief that you must personally handle everything. And many entrepreneurs resist this, not because they want to stay small, but because control feels safe. When you are involved in every decision, you know what is happening. When you approve everything, you feel secure. When every problem comes through you, you feel important. But that importance comes at a cost. Because every dependency on you becomes a limitation for the business. Imagine a business where every customer issue requires the owner's approval. Every hiring decision requires the owner's involvement. Every marketing campaign depends on the owner's attention. Every operational problem waits for the owner's solution. How far can that business grow? Not very far, because the business can only move as fast as the owner can move. And every owner has limits. This is why scaling is not about working harder. It is about removing bottlenecks. And the biggest bottleneck is often the entrepreneur. Not intentionally, not because they lack intelligence, but because they have built a business that depends on them. The irony is that many entrepreneurs become victims of their own success. They work hard to grow. They attract more customers. They increase revenue. But instead of gaining freedom, they create more responsibilities, more meetings, more decisions, more stress, more demands. And eventually they realize something surprising. They didn't build a business. They built a machine that cannot function without them. At that point, the business owns them, not the other way around. This is one of the most common invisible barriers to scaling. The inability to transition from operator to architect, from worker to builder, from participant to leader. Another invisible barrier is the need to feel productive. Many entrepreneurs confuse activity with progress. They believe being busy means they are moving forward. So they fill their days with tasks, emails, calls, meetings, administrative work, constant movement, constant activity. But activity alone does not create growth. Growth comes from high-impact actions, and those actions often look different. Strategic planning, system creation, team development, process improvement, long-term thinking. The challenge is that these activities do not always feel productive in the moment. There is no immediate reward, no instant feedback, no quick win. So many entrepreneurs avoid them. They return to the comfort of being busy. And as a result, they stay trapped in daily operations. Another invisible barrier is fear. Not fear of failure, fear of growth. Because growth creates uncertainty. A larger business requires bigger decisions, greater responsibility, more complex challenges, higher expectations. And not everyone is prepared for that. So sometimes entrepreneurs unconsciously sabotage their own growth. They delay decisions, avoid opportunities, stay inside their comfort zone, not because they lack ambition, but because growth demands change, and change feels uncomfortable. Another barrier is limited thinking. Many entrepreneurs unknowingly create ceilings for themselves. They decide what is possible before reality ever does. They assume certain goals are unrealistic. Certain markets are too competitive. Certain levels of success are out of reach. And once those assumptions become beliefs, their actions follow. Because your business rarely grows beyond your expectations. If you think small, you act small. If you act small, you get small results. And those results reinforce your beliefs. Chapter 2. Why hard work becomes the enemy of growth. One of the most dangerous beliefs in business is also one of the most common. The belief that hard work solves everything. Most entrepreneurs are taught this from the very beginning. Work harder, stay later, push more, outwork everyone. And in the early stages of business, this advice works. Hard work creates momentum. It helps you acquire your first customers, build your first product, generate your first revenue. When resources are limited, effort becomes your greatest advantage. You compensate for lack of capital with determination. You compensate for lack of experience with persistence. You compensate for lack of systems with hustle. And because hard work helps you get started, you naturally assume it will help you scale. But this is where many entrepreneurs make a costly mistake. They assume the strategy that got them here will get them there. It won't. Because every stage of business requires a different version of you. The entrepreneur who starts a business is not the same entrepreneur who scales one. The skills are different. The priorities are different. The thinking is different. And if you continue relying on hard work alone, something strange begins to happen. The harder you work, the harder growth becomes. At first, this feels confusing. You are putting in more hours than ever. You are sacrificing more than ever. You are carrying more responsibility than ever. Yet progress slows. Revenue plateaus. Stress increases. The business feels heavier. not lighter. And that's because hard work has quietly become the bottleneck. The business is growing, but it is growing around you. Every new customer creates more work. Every new opportunity creates more responsibility. Every new sale creates more demands on your time. Growth is happening, but scalability is not. The business is expanding, but the system is not. So every improvement comes with an equal increase in workload. And eventually you hit a ceiling. Not because the market is limited, not because demand is limited, because your personal capacity is limited. There are only 24 hours in a day, only so much energy, only so much attention. And once your business depends entirely on those resources, growth becomes impossible. This is why so many business owners feel trapped. They own a company, but they have no freedom. They generate revenue, but they are exhausted. They appear successful from the outside, but internally they are overwhelmed because they are carrying a business that was never designed to function without them. This is the invisible cost of hard work, not failure. Dependency. The business becomes dependent on the owner, and dependency prevents scale. Think about it this way. Imagine a restaurant where the owner cooks every meal, handles every customer complaint, orders every supply, approves every decision, schedules every employee. At first, the restaurant may operate successfully. But what happens when customer demand doubles? Can the owner cook twice as many meals? Handle twice as many issues? Manage twice as many employees? Not realistically. Eventually, growth slows. Not because demand disappeared, because the owner became the bottleneck. This happens in nearly every industry. Consultants, agencies, e-commerce businesses, service providers, freelancers, startups. The owner becomes the center of everything. And while that feels productive, it creates fragility. The business cannot move faster than the owner can move. This is where scaling begins. Not with more effort, but with a different question. Instead of asking, "How can I work harder?" you begin asking, "How can this work without me?" That single question changes everything. Because now your focus shifts. You stop looking for ways to increase effort. You start looking for ways to increase leverage. You stop trying to do more. You start trying to create systems. You stop solving the same problem repeatedly. You start building structures that prevent the problem from occurring again. This is the difference between an operator and a builder. Operators solve problems. Builders eliminate them. Operators focus on tasks. Builders focus on systems. Operators work inside the business. Builders work on the business. And this shift is uncomfortable because systems do not provide immediate gratification. Hard work feels productive. You can see it, measure it, experience it. But system building feels slow. You spend time documenting processes, creating workflows, training people, building infrastructure. And at first, it feels like less progress. But over time, it creates exponential growth. Because every system removes future work. Every process saves future time. Every structure increases future capacity. And eventually, the business becomes larger than your personal effort. That is when real scaling begins. Another reason entrepreneurs struggle with this transition is identity. Many people take pride in being the hardest worker in the room. They enjoy solving every problem, being involved in everything, being needed. It feels important, valuable, meaningful. But being needed by every part of the business is not a strength. It is a vulnerability. Because if everything depends on you, everything is at risk. The strongest businesses are not built around heroes. They are built around systems. A hero can have a bad day. A system cannot. A hero gets tired. A system continues. A hero eventually reaches capacity. A system can expand. This is why wealthy entrepreneurs focus differently. They do not wake up asking, "What work needs to be done today?" They ask, "What system needs to be improved today?" Because systems scale. Effort does not. Another important realization is that growth requires subtraction. Most entrepreneurs think scaling means adding more. More customers, more products, more employees, more services. But often the first step is removing complexity, removing unnecessary tasks, removing inefficiencies, removing dependence on the founder. Because every unnecessary responsibility steals capacity from growth. Every repeated decision steals mental energy. Every preventable problem steals attention. And attention is one of your most valuable resources. Where your attention goes, your business follows. So if all your attention is consumed by operations, there is none left for strategy. If all your attention is spent managing chaos, there is none left for innovation. If all your attention is focused on today's problems, there is none left for tomorrow's opportunities. Chapter 3. The Founder Trap. When your business cannot grow without you. Every entrepreneur dreams of building a successful business. More customers, more revenue, more freedom, more control over their future. That is usually the reason they start in the first place. To escape limitations, to create opportunities, to build something that belongs to them. But somewhere along the journey, many entrepreneurs discover a painful reality. The business they built for freedom has become a prison. Not because it is failing, because it depends entirely on them. Every important decision requires their approval. Every major problem requires their attention. Every opportunity requires their involvement. Every customer issue eventually finds its way back to them. And over time, the business becomes less of an asset and more of a responsibility. This is known as the founder trap, one of the most common barriers preventing businesses from scaling. The founder trap occurs when the owner becomes the central operating system of the business. Nothing moves without them. Nothing gets approved without them. Nothing gets solved without them. At first, this seems normal. After all, it is your business. Who should care more than you? Who should understand it better than you? Who should make better decisions than you? And during the early stages, that thinking makes sense. When resources are limited, founders often have to do everything. Sales, marketing, customer service, operations, hiring, finance, product development. The founder wears every hat, and because of that, the business survives. The problem is that survival habits often become growth limitations. The behaviors that helped build the business eventually prevent it from expanding, because what works at one level becomes ineffective at the next. Think about a small company generating modest revenue. A founder can personally oversee almost everything. But what happens when revenue doubles? What happens when the customer base triples? What happens when the team grows from 3 people to 30? Suddenly, the same level of involvement becomes impossible. Yet many founders continue trying. They work longer hours, take fewer breaks, carry more stress, and convince themselves they just need to push harder. But the issue is no longer effort. The issue is capacity. And capacity always has limits. This is where growth begins to slow. Not because demand is disappearing. Not because opportunities are shrinking. Because the founder has become the bottleneck. Imagine a highway. Traffic moves smoothly until every vehicle is forced into a single lane. The road ahead might be wide open. The destination might be clear. But progress slows because everything must pass through one point. That is exactly what happens when a business depends on one person. The founder becomes the single lane. Every decision, every approval, every solution, every important action. And eventually the entire business slows down. One of the reasons this trap is so difficult to recognize is that it often disguises itself as responsibility. Founders tell themselves, "I'm just making sure things are done correctly. I'm maintaining quality. I'm protecting the business." And sometimes those concerns are legitimate. But there is a difference between leadership and control. Leadership creates capacity. Control limits it. Leadership develops people. Control creates dependence. Leadership builds systems. Control builds bottlenecks. The founder trapped in control often believes nobody can perform at their level. Nobody understands the business like they do. Nobody cares as much as they do. And while that may be partially true, it creates a dangerous cycle. Because if nobody else can operate effectively, the founder never develops the people who can. The team remains dependent. The founder remains overwhelmed. And growth remains limited. Another symptom of the founder trap is decision fatigue. Every decision consumes energy. Some decisions are significant. Many are not. But when every decision flows through one person, mental resources become exhausted. The founder spends the day solving minor issues, approving routine tasks, answering repetitive questions, handling problems others should be solving. And by the time strategic decisions need attention, there is little energy left. This creates a dangerous imbalance. The founder becomes occupied with urgent matters while neglecting important ones. The business becomes reactive instead of strategic, and over time, growth suffers. Another hidden cost is speed. Businesses that depend on one person move slowly, not intentionally, but inevitably, because every decision must wait. Every approval creates delay. Every dependency creates friction. And in competitive markets, speed matters. Opportunities do not wait. Markets do not pause. Customers do not delay their decisions. The businesses that respond quickly often gain advantages. But founder-dependent businesses struggle to keep up because every action must pass through the same person. This is why scalable companies prioritize decision-making systems. They distribute authority, clarify responsibilities, empower capable people, not because they enjoy giving up control, because they understand growth requires it. Another major problem with the founder trap is burnout. Burnout does not happen because people work hard. Many successful entrepreneurs work extremely hard. Burnout happens when responsibility continually expands without relief, when pressure accumulates faster than capacity, when every challenge lands on the same shoulders. And many founders experience exactly that. The business grows, responsibilities grow, stress grows, but support does not. The founder becomes exhausted. Motivation declines, creativity decreases, decision quality suffers, and eventually the business begins to feel heavier than rewarding. Ironically, the business may be more successful than ever, yet the founder feels trapped. This is one of the clearest signs that dependency has become dangerous, because success should create freedom, not more captivity. Another consequence of the founder trap is that the business becomes fragile. Imagine what happens if the founder takes a month off. Would the business continue operating effectively? Would sales continue? Would customers remain supported? Would operations function smoothly? For many businesses, the answer is no. And that reveals a critical weakness. A business that cannot function without the founder is not truly scalable. It is merely founder-powered. And founder-powered businesses always face limits. Chapter 4. The Systems Advantage. Why some businesses scale effortlessly. If you study businesses that successfully scale, you will notice something surprising. From the outside, it often looks effortless. They grow faster, handle more customers, expand into new markets, increase revenue consistently, and somehow they do it without the chaos that destroys many growing companies. Meanwhile, other businesses seem to struggle with every step forward. A small increase in customers creates operational problems. A new employee creates management issues. A rise in revenue creates more stress instead of more freedom. The question is, why? Why do some businesses appear to scale smoothly while others constantly fight against growth? The answer is not talent. It is not luck. It is not even effort. The answer is systems. Because systems are the invisible engines behind every scalable business. Most people see the results, the revenue, the growth, the success, but they do not see the systems producing those outcomes. And that is where the real advantage exists. A system is simply a repeatable process that produces a predictable result. That may sound simple, but it changes everything. Without systems, a business relies on memory. With systems, a business relies on structure. Without systems, results depend on individuals. With systems, results depend on processes. Without systems, growth creates chaos. With systems, growth becomes manageable. Think about the world's largest businesses. They do not succeed because one person is working harder than everyone else. They succeed because thousands of people are operating within systems. Systems for hiring, systems for training, systems for sales, systems for customer service, systems for operations, systems for decision-making. Every important activity follows a structure, and that structure allows consistency at scale. The average entrepreneur often misunderstands this. They focus on outcomes. They see a successful company and ask, what product are they selling? What marketing strategy are they using? What niche are they targeting? Those questions matter, but they overlook something deeper: the systems behind those outcomes. Because two companies can sell the same product, use similar marketing, target the same customers, yet one scales rapidly while the other remains stuck. The difference is usually operational. One company has systems, the other has effort, and effort can only go so far. This is one of the most important shifts an entrepreneur can make, moving from task thinking to system thinking. Most business owners spend their days completing tasks, answering emails, handling customer requests, solving problems, managing operations. And while these activities are necessary, they create a dangerous pattern. The entrepreneur becomes trapped inside the work. They are constantly reacting, constantly responding, constantly moving, but rarely building. System thinkers operate differently. When a problem appears repeatedly, they do not simply solve it. They ask, why does this problem keep happening? What system would prevent this in the future? That question changes everything. Because instead of solving the same issue 50 times, they solve it once and build a process that prevents it from returning. Over time, those improvements compound. The business becomes more efficient, more predictable, more scalable. Another advantage of systems is consistency. Customers value consistency. Employees depend on consistency. Growth requires consistency. Yet many businesses operate entirely on improvisation. Different employees handle situations differently. Processes change daily. Decisions vary from person to person. And that inconsistency creates confusion. Customers receive different experiences. Employees make different decisions. Results become unpredictable. Systems eliminate much of that uncertainty. They create standards, expectations, guidelines. They ensure that important activities happen the same way every time. Not because creativity is discouraged, but because consistency creates reliability. And reliability builds trust. Another reason systems are powerful is because they reduce dependency. Every business has dependencies. The question is how many? A business without systems becomes dependent on specific people, specific knowledge, specific habits, specific individuals. If those people leave, the business struggles. If they get sick, operations slow down. If they take time off, productivity drops. The business becomes fragile. Systems create stability. Knowledge is documented. Processes are defined. Responsibilities are clear. The business becomes less dependent on any one individual, and that stability allows growth. One of the biggest misconceptions entrepreneurs have is that systems reduce flexibility. They imagine bureaucracy, complex rules, endless procedures. But effective systems actually create freedom, because when routine activities are structured, energy becomes available for more important work: innovation, strategy, growth, leadership. Instead of constantly dealing with predictable problems, the entrepreneur can focus on opportunities. Another important benefit is speed. This sounds counterintuitive. Many people believe systems slow things down. In reality, poorly designed businesses move slower than well-designed systems. Think about how much time is wasted when employees are constantly asking questions, when tasks are unclear, when decisions require unnecessary approvals, when mistakes have to be corrected repeatedly. That friction destroys speed. Systems reduce friction. They create clarity, and clarity accelerates execution. A team that understands exactly how things work moves faster than a team constantly guessing. This becomes especially important during periods of growth. Growth exposes weaknesses. Every flaw becomes more visible. Every inefficiency becomes more expensive. Every bottleneck becomes more damaging. A small business can survive with weak systems. A larger business cannot. As volume increases, complexity increases. Without systems, complexity eventually creates chaos. With systems, complexity remains manageable. This is why businesses often experience growing pains. Not because growth is bad, because the systems are not prepared for growth. The business expands faster than its structure, and eventually everything feels overwhelming. Customer issues increase. Operational problems multiply. Communication breaks down. Stress rises. And growth begins to feel like a burden. Chapter 5. The hidden cost of being involved in everything. Most entrepreneurs believe involvement is a strength. They pride themselves on knowing every detail, every customer, every employee, every decision, every process. And in the beginning, that level of involvement often feels necessary. After all, nobody understands the business better than the founder. Nobody has invested more. Nobody cares more. So naturally, the entrepreneur becomes involved in everything. Every approval, every problem, every conversation, every opportunity. And at first, this seems like responsible leadership. But as the business grows, something changes. The same involvement that once helped the business survive begins to prevent it from scaling. The founder doesn't notice it immediately. Growth may continue for a while. Revenue may increase. The team may expand. From the outside, everything looks healthy. But beneath the surface, a hidden cost begins to emerge. And that cost grows larger with every new responsibility the founder takes on. Because involvement is not free. Every decision requires attention. Every interruption consumes focus. Every problem requires energy. And attention, focus, and energy are limited resources. The more involved you become in daily operations, the less capacity you have for strategic thinking. This is where many businesses get stuck. Not because the owner lacks intelligence, not because the market lacks opportunity, but because the founder is spending their highest value resource on low-value activities. Imagine a CEO of a billion-dollar company personally answering customer support tickets all day. It sounds ridiculous. Not because customer support isn't important, but because the CEO's time is more valuable elsewhere. The same principle applies at every stage of business. As your company grows, your role must evolve. The problem is that many entrepreneurs never allow that evolution to happen. They continue operating as if the business is still in its earliest stages, still solving every issue, still approving every decision, still inserting themselves into every process. And eventually, growth slows. One reason this happens is control. Control feels safe. When you are involved in everything, you know what is happening. You know the problems. You know the opportunities. You know the details. And that creates a sense of security. But control often creates an illusion. Because while you may know everything happening inside the business, you are also limiting how much the business can grow. Every decision that requires your approval creates a delay. Every task that requires your attention creates a bottleneck. Every responsibility you refuse to release creates a constraint. And constraints eventually become ceilings. This is one of the biggest differences between entrepreneurs who stay small and those who scale successfully. Small business owners often focus on control. Scalable business owners focus on capacity. They understand that growth requires creating more decision makers, more leaders, more systems, more independence within the organization. Because a business that depends on one person's attention can only grow as large as that person's capacity. And every human being has limits. Another hidden cost of constant involvement is decision fatigue. Every day, entrepreneurs make decisions. Some are important. Many are not. What should be approved? Who should handle this issue? How should this problem be solved? What should happen next? Individually, these decisions may seem insignificant, but collectively, they drain mental energy. And the more decisions you make, the harder quality decision-making becomes. By the end of the day, many founders find themselves exhausted, not from physical labor, but from constant mental demands. The problem is that important strategic decisions require mental clarity, vision, planning, growth, leadership. These responsibilities demand your best thinking. But if your energy is consumed by routine operational decisions, there is little left for strategy. This creates a dangerous situation. The founder becomes highly productive but strategically ineffective, busy all day, yet making little progress on the things that truly matter. Another hidden cost is team development. Many entrepreneurs unintentionally weaken their teams by staying involved in everything. When employees know the founder will solve every problem, they stop developing problem-solving skills. When managers know every decision will eventually be reviewed, they stop taking ownership. When teams know leadership will intervene constantly, accountability decreases. Over time, the organization becomes dependent, not because the team lacks ability, because they have never been given the opportunity to develop it. Strong teams are not built through constant supervision. They are built through responsibility, ownership, trust, and experience. People grow when they are allowed to make decisions, solve problems, learn from mistakes. Without that process, growth stalls, not only for the business, but for the people inside it. Another consequence of excessive involvement is slower execution. This may seem counterintuitive. Many founders believe their involvement speeds things up. After all, they know the business best. But the opposite is often true. When every issue requires approval, work slows down. When every decision must move through the founder, execution slows down. When employees wait for direction instead of acting independently, progress slows down. The business becomes less agile, less responsive, less adaptable. And in competitive markets, speed matters. Opportunities appear and disappear quickly. Customers expect fast responses. Markets change rapidly. Businesses that move slowly often lose ground to those that move faster. And speed comes from empowerment, not centralization. Another hidden cost is stress. The founder who insists on being involved in everything carries an enormous burden. Every problem becomes personal. Every mistake becomes their responsibility. Every challenge lands on their desk. Eventually, the pressure accumulates. The business may continue growing, but the founder feels increasingly trapped. Weekends disappear. Vacations become impossible. Time off becomes stressful, because the business has become dependent on their presence. This is one of the clearest signs of an unhealthy business structure. A business should create freedom, not eliminate it. A business should provide opportunities, not constant pressure. Chapter 6. Why smart entrepreneurs build leverage instead of working longer hours. Most entrepreneurs have been taught a simple formula. If you want more results, work harder. If you want more revenue, work longer. If you want more success, push yourself further. And for a while, that formula seems to work. You put in extra hours. You take on more responsibility. You sacrifice weekends. You stay up late solving problems. And the business grows. At least initially. This creates a dangerous belief. The belief that effort is the primary driver of success. So whenever growth slows, the entrepreneur responds the same way. Work more. Push harder. Do more. But eventually, they discover a frustrating reality. There comes a point where working harder produces smaller and smaller returns. The hours increase. The stress increases. The workload increases. Yet the results barely move. This is where many entrepreneurs become trapped, because they continue using a strategy that has already reached its limit. The problem is not a lack of effort. The problem is a lack of leverage. And leverage is what separates businesses that grow steadily from businesses that scale dramatically. Most people hear the word leverage and immediately think about money, investments, loans, financial tools. But leverage is much broader than that. Leverage is anything that allows you to produce greater results without a proportional increase in effort. It is the ability to multiply output, to create more impact with the same amount of energy, or sometimes even less. Without leverage, growth remains tied directly to your personal effort. With leverage, growth becomes detached from your time. And that changes everything. Think about a freelancer. A freelancer earns money by exchanging time for value. If they stop working, income stops. To earn more, they must work more. Their income is directly connected to their personal output. Now compare that to a business owner with systems, employees, technology, and processes. Revenue can continue flowing even when they are not actively working. Why? Because leverage exists. The business has mechanisms producing results beyond the owner's direct effort. This is one of the most important transitions an entrepreneur can make, moving from effort-based growth to leverage-based growth. Because effort has limits, leverage scales. The first form of leverage is people. One skilled individual can accomplish a great deal, but a team aligned around a clear mission can accomplish exponentially more. Yet many entrepreneurs struggle with this, not because they don't understand the value of people, but because they struggle to trust them. They think, no one can do it like I can. No one understands a business like I do. No one cares as much as I do. And while those statements may contain some truth, they create a major limitation. Because if nobody else can contribute meaningfully, the business remains dependent on the founder. And dependency kills scale. Smart entrepreneurs understand that building people is one of the highest leverage activities available. Every capable employee increases capacity. Every empowered leader multiplies execution. Every strong team member reduces dependency on the founder. And over time, those gains compound. The second form of leverage is systems. People without systems create inconsistency. Systems without people create inactivity. But together, they create scale. A system allows work to be repeated efficiently, predictably, reliably, without requiring constant oversight. Imagine solving a problem once and benefiting from that solution thousands of times. That is leverage. Instead of repeatedly fixing the same issue, you build a process that prevents it. Instead of repeatedly explaining the same task, you create a system that teaches it. Instead of repeatedly managing the same problem, you design a workflow that eliminates it. That is how businesses become scalable. Not through effort, through leverage. The third form of leverage is technology. Technology allows businesses to perform tasks faster, cheaper, and more accurately. A single software tool can replace hundreds of hours of manual work. An automated process can perform functions 24 hours a day. A digital system can handle volumes of activity impossible for one person. Yet many entrepreneurs underutilize technology because they focus only on immediate tasks. They solve problems manually instead of creating automated solutions. They spend hours doing work that could be completed in minutes. And over time, those inefficiencies become expensive, not only financially, but strategically, because every hour spent on repetitive work is an hour unavailable for growth. Another powerful form of leverage is knowledge. Knowledge compounds. Every lesson learned, every skill acquired, every insight gained can produce value repeatedly. This is why successful entrepreneurs invest heavily in learning, not because they enjoy consuming information, but because knowledge improves decision-making, and better decisions create better outcomes. A single insight can save years of mistakes. A single strategy can generate millions in value. A single lesson can transform an entire business. That is leverage. Small inputs, large outputs. Another form of leverage that is often overlooked is reputation. A strong reputation creates opportunities that effort alone cannot generate. Trust accelerates business. Credibility opens doors. Authority attracts attention. When people trust your expertise, opportunities begin finding you. Partnerships become easier. Sales become easier. Growth becomes easier. This is why successful entrepreneurs protect their reputation carefully, because they understand it is one of the most valuable assets they own. And unlike effort, reputation can continue producing value long after the initial work is complete. Another critical shift happens when entrepreneurs embrace leverage. They stop asking, "What can I do today?" and start asking, "What can I build today that continues producing results tomorrow?" That question changes everything, because now the focus is no longer activity. It is multiplication, not effort, but impact, not doing more, but creating more through better systems and structures. This mindset separates operators from builders. Operators focus on immediate output. Builders focus on long-term leverage. Operators trade time for results. Builders create assets that generate results repeatedly. Operators remain essential to every process. Chapter 7. the decision-making gap that separates small businesses from scalable ones. Every business is a reflection of decisions, not just the big decisions, not just the obvious ones, but thousands of small decisions made over time. Who to hire, what to prioritize, which opportunities to pursue, which opportunities to ignore, how resources are allocated, how problems are solved, how time is spent, how risks are evaluated. Every outcome in business can be traced back to a series of decisions. And this is why two businesses operating in the same industry can experience completely different results. One grows steadily. The other remains stuck. One scales efficiently. The other struggles constantly. One creates momentum. The other creates frustration. The difference is often not talent. It is not effort. It is not even experience. The difference is decision-making. Because scaling is ultimately a decision-making challenge. And most entrepreneurs do not realize how much their decisions are limiting growth. At first, the impact seems small. A delayed decision here. A poor hire there. An opportunity ignored. A problem left unresolved. Individually, none of these choices appear significant. But over time, they compound. And eventually, they shape the future of the business. The challenge is that most business owners make decisions based on the wrong criteria. They make decisions based on comfort, convenience, habit, emotion, short-term pressure, instead of making decisions based on long-term growth. This creates an invisible gap, a gap between how small businesses think and how scalable businesses think. And that gap widens over time. One of the most common decision-making mistakes is prioritizing certainty over opportunity. Entrepreneurs naturally want certainty. They want guarantees. They want proof. They want to know exactly how things will work out before taking action. But business does not reward certainty. Business rewards calculated risk. Every major opportunity comes with uncertainty. Every expansion carries risk. Every investment involves unknowns. Every strategic decision requires operating without perfect information. The entrepreneurs who scale understand this. They do not wait for certainty. They gather information, assess risk, make a decision, and move forward. Meanwhile, many small business owners remain stuck analyzing possibilities, waiting, delaying, overthinking. And while they wait, opportunities disappear. Another major difference is the speed of decision-making. Many founders believe caution is always beneficial, and sometimes it is. But slow decision-making can be incredibly expensive. Markets move. Competitors adapt. Customer needs evolve. Opportunities have expiration dates. A business that consistently delays decisions often loses momentum. Not because the decisions themselves were wrong, because they came too late. Scalable businesses understand the value of speed. They do not seek perfect decisions. They seek effective decisions made quickly enough to create action. Because momentum matters. A good decision today is often more valuable than a perfect decision 6 months from now. Another decision-making trap involves resource allocation. Every business has limited resources, limited time, limited money, limited energy, limited attention. The question is not whether resources are limited. The question is where they are being directed. Many entrepreneurs spend resources protecting the present, maintaining comfort, avoiding risk, managing routine operations. And while those things matter, they rarely create growth. Growth comes from investing resources into the future. New systems, new opportunities, new capabilities, new infrastructure. This requires discipline, because future-focused investments often produce delayed rewards. And delayed rewards are uncomfortable, especially when immediate needs demand attention. Another critical difference is how successful entrepreneurs evaluate problems. Most people see problems as interruptions, obstacles, annoyances, things to eliminate as quickly as possible. But scalable business owners view problems differently. They see problems as information, signals, indicators of weaknesses within systems. When a problem appears repeatedly, they do not simply solve it. They investigate it. They ask, why did this happen? What allowed this to occur? What system failed? How can we prevent it from happening again? This mindset transforms challenges into opportunities for improvement. And over time, those improvements create significant competitive advantages. Another major gap involves emotional decision-making. Business is emotional. There is no escaping that. Money creates emotion. Pressure creates emotion. Uncertainty creates emotion. Success creates emotion. Failure creates emotion. But scalable entrepreneurs learn to separate emotion from decision quality. They acknowledge emotions, but they do not allow emotions to drive strategy, because emotional decisions are often reactive. Fear creates hesitation. Excitement creates impulsiveness. Frustration creates poor judgment. Ego creates blind spots. The businesses that scale successfully build decision-making frameworks that reduce emotional influence. They rely on principles, data, processes, and long-term objectives, instead of temporary feelings. Another important distinction is the willingness to make unpopular decisions. Growth often requires difficult choices, ending unproductive partnerships, changing strategies, restructuring teams, saying no to opportunities that seem attractive but create distractions. Many entrepreneurs avoid these decisions because they fear conflict, discomfort, criticism, but avoidance creates stagnation, and stagnation eventually becomes decline. Scalable businesses understand that difficult decisions are often necessary, not because they enjoy making them, but because growth demands them. Another hidden issue is decision ownership. In many businesses, every decision flows through the founder. Every question, every approval, every adjustment, every exception. At first, this seems responsible, but over time, it creates dependency. The team stops thinking independently. Managers stop exercising judgment. Employees stop taking initiative. And the organization becomes slower, weaker, less adaptable. Scalable businesses distribute decision-making authority. They create clear guidelines, clear expectations, clear responsibilities, and then allow capable people to act. Chapter 8. Why most businesses hit a ceiling they never break through. Every entrepreneur eventually encounters a wall. Not a physical wall, not an obvious one, an invisible ceiling. A point where growth slows down, momentum weakens, and progress becomes harder than it used to be. At first, the business grows steadily. Customers increase. Revenue rises. Confidence grows. The future feels exciting. Every effort seems to produce results. Every improvement creates momentum. Everything appears to be moving in the right direction. Then something changes. The business stops growing at the same pace. Revenue begins to plateau. Operational problems increase. Stress rises. The founder works harder than ever, yet results remain relatively unchanged. This is the point where many entrepreneurs become confused, because they're doing more, but receiving less, working longer, but growing slower, pushing harder, but moving less. And the natural assumption is that something outside the business is responsible: the economy, the competition, the market, customer demand. But often the real problem is much closer. The business has reached the limits of its current structure, and structure always determines scale. Every business is perfectly designed to achieve its current results. That statement may sound strange, but think about it. The systems you have, the people you have, the processes you have, the leadership you have, the decision-making systems you have. Together, they create your current outcome. And if those structures do not change, neither do the results. This is why businesses hit ceilings. Not because opportunity disappears, because the organization is no longer capable of handling greater growth. The entrepreneur wants expansion, but the business is not built for it. Imagine trying to pour more water through a narrow pipe. You can increase pressure, push harder, force more water toward the opening. But eventually the pipe becomes the limitation, not the water. The same thing happens in business. The founder often focuses on generating more opportunities, more leads, more customers, more sales. But if the systems supporting those opportunities are weak, growth creates problems instead of progress. Customer service becomes overwhelmed. Operations become disorganized. Communication breaks down. Employees become stressed. Mistakes increase. And growth starts creating chaos. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of scaling. Growth does not solve weaknesses. Growth exposes them. Every weakness hidden inside a small business becomes more visible as volume increases. Weak hiring processes. Weak communication. Weak systems. Weak leadership. Weak decision-making. All of it becomes amplified. And if those weaknesses remain unresolved, they eventually create a ceiling. Another reason businesses get stuck is because founders continue solving today's problems using yesterday's methods. The strategy that helped a business reach one level often becomes ineffective at the next. But many entrepreneurs resist change because the old methods feel familiar, comfortable, reliable. After all, they worked before. So the founder keeps doing more of the same. More effort, more involvement, more control. But growth demands evolution. The entrepreneur who started the business is rarely the same entrepreneur capable of scaling it. Different stages require different skills, different thinking, different priorities. And the founders who refuse to evolve eventually become part of the ceiling themselves. Not intentionally, but inevitably, because businesses rarely outgrow the thinking of their leaders. Another major ceiling is operational complexity. Every new customer, every new employee, every new product, every new service adds complexity. At first, complexity seems manageable. The business is small. Communication is simple. Everyone knows what is happening. But growth changes that. More moving parts create more opportunities for breakdowns. And without systems, complexity quickly becomes chaos. This is why scalable businesses obsess over simplification. Not because they dislike growth, but because they understand complexity is expensive. Every unnecessary process creates friction. Every unclear responsibility creates confusion. Every inefficient workflow creates delays. Over time, these small inefficiencies compound, and eventually they slow growth. Another hidden ceiling is leadership capacity. Many entrepreneurs assume business growth is primarily about customers, marketing, sales, revenue. But leadership becomes increasingly important as organizations grow. Because scaling is not simply about managing work. It is about managing people. And people create complexity, different personalities, different strengths, different expectations, different challenges. A founder who can successfully manage a team of 3 may struggle to lead a team of 30, not because they lack intelligence, but because leadership itself requires growth. Communication must improve. Delegation must improve. Decision-making must improve. Vision must become clearer. Without those developments, leadership becomes the bottleneck, and bottlenecks create ceilings. Another common ceiling appears in company culture. Most entrepreneurs underestimate culture because it is difficult to measure. You cannot easily see it. You cannot easily calculate it. But culture influences everything. How people communicate, how they solve problems, how they respond to challenges, how they treat customers, how they handle responsibility. Strong cultures accelerate growth. Weak cultures slow it down. As businesses grow, culture becomes increasingly important because culture determines what happens when leadership is not present. And if culture is weak, inconsistency follows. Another invisible ceiling involves fear. Fear of delegation, fear of investment, fear of change, fear of making mistakes, fear of growth itself. Many entrepreneurs say they want a larger business, but unconsciously resist the decisions required to create one. Because every new level brings new responsibilities, new risks, new uncertainties, and uncertainty creates discomfort. So growth opportunities are delayed, avoided, or ignored. Not because they lack potential, because they require transformation. And transformation is uncomfortable. This is why scaling is often more psychological than operational. The systems matter, the people matter, the strategies matter, but none of them matter if the entrepreneur refuses to grow. Chapter 9. The Shift from Entrepreneur to CEO. There is a moment in every successful business when the founder faces a decision. Not a financial decision, not a marketing decision, not an operational decision, an identity decision, a decision about who they must become if the business is going to continue growing. Most entrepreneurs never realize this moment has arrived. They keep doing what they have always done, working harder, solving more problems, managing more people, taking on more responsibility. And for a while, growth continues. But eventually something changes. The business becomes larger, more complex, more demanding, and suddenly, the habits that once created success begin limiting it. The entrepreneur has reached a point where effort is no longer enough. A new role is required. This is the shift from entrepreneur to CEO. And it is one of the most important transitions in business. The entrepreneur starts the business. The CEO scales it. The entrepreneur creates momentum. The CEO creates structure. The entrepreneur solves problems. The CEO builds systems that prevent problems. The entrepreneur focuses on survival. The CEO focuses on expansion. Both roles are valuable, but they're not the same. And many founders struggle because they never make the transition. They continue operating as entrepreneurs long after the business requires a CEO. To understand this shift, consider how most businesses begin. In the beginning, speed matters more than structure. You need customers, revenue, validation, momentum. There is little time for perfect systems, little time for formal processes. The founder acts quickly, makes decisions rapidly, solves problems personally, and that approach works. It helps the business survive. But survival and scaling are different games. The skills required to win one are not always the skills required to win the other. As the business grows, the founder can no longer rely solely on personal effort. There are too many decisions, too many employees, too many moving parts, too many responsibilities. The organization becomes more complex, and complexity demands leadership, not just activity. This is where many founders get stuck, because becoming a CEO requires letting go of things that once made them successful. It requires spending less time doing, and more time thinking, less time solving, and more time designing, less time managing tasks, and more time shaping direction. That feels uncomfortable, especially for people who built their business through action. Many founders take pride in being involved, being busy, being essential. But scaling requires a different type of value. The CEO's value is not measured by how much work they complete. It is measured by how much capacity they create. This is a difficult concept for many entrepreneurs, because activity feels productive. You can see it, measure it, experience it. But leadership often looks invisible. Strategic thinking, planning, vision, culture development, system design. These activities do not always create immediate results, but they determine long-term outcomes. And long-term outcomes are what scaling is all about. One of the biggest differences between entrepreneurs and CEOs is focus. Entrepreneurs often focus on opportunities. CEOs focus on priorities. The entrepreneur sees possibilities everywhere. New products, new markets, new ideas, new ventures. And that mindset is valuable in the beginning. But growth eventually requires concentration, because every opportunity comes with a cost. Time, money, attention, resources. The CEO understands that saying yes to one thing means saying no to another. So they become selective, disciplined, focused. Not because opportunities are bad, but because distraction is expensive. Another major shift involves decision-making. Entrepreneurs often make decisions based on instinct, experience, speed, and intuition. Again, this works early on. But as organizations grow, decisions impact more people, more systems, more outcomes. The stakes become higher, and decision-making must become more intentional, more structured, more strategic. The CEO thinks differently, not just about today's outcome, but about tomorrow's consequences. Not just about immediate gains, but long-term sustainability. This broader perspective creates better decisions. And better decisions create stronger businesses. Another important transition is moving from individual contribution to organizational contribution. The entrepreneur asks, "What can I do?" The CEO asks, "What can the organization do?" That shift changes everything, because growth no longer depends on one person's output. It depends on the collective capacity of the business. The CEO focuses on developing that capacity, hiring the right people, creating strong systems, building leadership, strengthening culture, improving communication. These investments may not produce immediate results, but they create future scalability. And scalability is what separates businesses that remain small from businesses that grow dramatically. Another challenge founders face during this transition is trust. Trusting employees, trusting managers, trusting systems, trusting processes. Many entrepreneurs struggle with this because nobody knows the business like they do. Nobody understands the vision like they do. Chapter 10. The invisible barrier was never the business. As we reach the end of this journey, it is worth returning to the question that started everything. Why do so many businesses fail to scale? Why do so many entrepreneurs work harder every year but see diminishing returns? Why do so many founders remain trapped in businesses they once hoped would create freedom? At the beginning, the answers seem obvious. Not enough customers, not enough capital, not enough time, not enough opportunities, not enough resources. And while those challenges are real, they are rarely the true barrier. Because throughout this audiobook, a different pattern has emerged. A deeper pattern, a more important pattern. The invisible barrier was never the business itself. It was the way the business was being built. It was the systems, the structure, the decisions, the leadership, the habits, the thinking, and most importantly, the founder behind it all. This is the truth many entrepreneurs spend years trying to avoid. The business does not grow first. The entrepreneur grows first. Then the business follows. Every stage of growth demands a new version of the person leading it. The entrepreneur who starts the company is not the same entrepreneur who scales it. The person capable of managing 5 customers is not automatically capable of managing 5,000. The skills required to generate your first sale are not the same skills required to build a company that operates without your constant involvement. Growth demands evolution, again and again. This is why some businesses scale rapidly while others remain stuck for years. It is not always because one founder is smarter, or more talented, or luckier. It is often because one founder is willing to evolve while the other is trying to preserve old habits. And old habits create new limitations. Throughout this audiobook, we explored the traps that prevent growth. The belief that hard work alone can solve every problem. The founder trap. The need to remain involved in everything. The absence of systems. The lack of leverage. The hidden ceilings that emerge as complexity increases. The decision-making gaps that slow progress. And the difficult transition from entrepreneur to CEO. Each of these challenges appears different on the surface. But underneath, they share the same root cause. Dependency. The business depends too heavily on the founder. The founder becomes the bottleneck. The decision-maker. The problem solver. The approval process. The system. And when one person becomes the system, scale becomes impossible. Because people have limits. Even talented people. Even driven people. Even extraordinary people. There are limits to energy. Limits to time. Limits to attention. Limits to capacity. And businesses built entirely around one person's capacity eventually reach a ceiling. That ceiling may arrive at 6 figures, 7 figures, or even higher. But it arrives. Because the limitation is structural, not market-driven. This is why the entrepreneurs who build lasting companies think differently. They understand that their job is not to become more important. Their job is to become less necessary. That idea sounds strange at first. Many founders measure their value by how much the business needs them, how many problems they solve, how many decisions they make, how involved they are. But scalable businesses are built on the opposite principle. The more the business depends on the founder, the smaller it remains. The less it depends on the founder, the larger it can become. This is where true freedom begins. Not when revenue reaches a certain number. Not when the business achieves a specific milestone. But when the business gains the ability to operate without constant intervention. Because revenue without freedom is simply another form of employment. A larger paycheck. A larger responsibility. A larger burden. Freedom comes from systems. From leadership. From structure. From leverage. And those elements do not appear by accident. They are built intentionally. One decision at a time. One process at a time. One improvement at a time. This is another lesson many entrepreneurs overlook. Scaling is rarely the result of one breakthrough moment. It is usually the result of hundreds of small improvements. A better hiring process. A clearer system. A stronger team. A better decision. A more effective workflow. Individually, these improvements may seem insignificant, but together, they compound. And compounding is one of the most powerful forces in business. Just as small mistakes compound into major problems, small improvements compound into extraordinary growth. This is why the businesses that scale successfully often look ordinary from the outside. There is no magic, no secret shortcut, no hidden formula, just consistent improvements applied over time, systematically, relentlessly, patiently. Another important realization is that scaling never truly ends. Many entrepreneurs imagine there is a final destination, a point where all problems disappear, a point where everything becomes easy, a point where growth becomes automatic. That point does not exist. Every new level creates new challenges, new bottlenecks, new ceilings, new responsibilities. The difference is that successful entrepreneurs stop viewing challenges as signs of failure. They see them as indicators of growth, evidence that the business has reached a new stage, evidence that new systems are required, evidence that new leadership is required, evidence that they must evolve once again. Because scaling is not a destination. It is a continuous process of removing limitations. And every limitation removed creates new capacity, new opportunities, new possibilities. Perhaps the most important lesson of all is this. Your business will rarely exceed the quality of your thinking. If your thinking remains reactive, the business becomes reactive. If your thinking remains limited, the business becomes limited.